getting a special treat today. We are releasing 2 bonusodes on the regular feed. I'm only going to release about 45 minutes of this interview because it's an absolute... Also, Mitch sent me Orgone, and I can absolutely attest to its potency. Orgone is super amazing. Check it out, research it, check out Wilhelm Reich, listen to this episode, sign up on our Patreon, and get the rest. Boom, you know how it goes. Love and respect to all of the Fire Tribe out there. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to go sign up for the Telegram. We have a bunch of awesome people over there. A community, growing. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy. About 6 minutes of some dancey tunes for you in the beginning too, because, hey, Mercury Gatorade, you know what I mean? Love you guys, Fire Tribe. Bless up.
How much of this realm is actually non-physical, and how much of our problem and our solution is non-physical. You start studying Reich's work. Orgone Energy is essentially a life energy, a life force energy that passes through everything in existence. It can be transmitted, received, accumulated, generated, but it is essentially the flow of the natural flow of life that runs through this universe. And then, of course, there is an inversion to that would, he called it, this book, Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight. This book, Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight. I'd recommend people read that one too. By 2016, I knew that there were fake clouds, and there are most clouds I think in the sky may actually be just electrified fake. I get in trouble with that opinion now too, but there's moisture in the air. I think that most clouds are magnetized and manipulated in such a way that they can cover the sun or the moon without it having to be an obvious chemtrail, or without it having to be that really obvious like white indented stuff that looks like grill marks on the flat light crap in the sky. Chemtrail or the flat light crap.
We're almost fucking dead.
The flat lifeless crap in the sky.
We're almost fucking dead. Make mud, not war. This is another level of control that it just, like, for people that are passionate about life, it infuriates you. Scratching the surface is covering up everything really, really deep and heavy, so that we have to dig so fucking hard to even know a glimpse of reality.
As I learned more about the electric universe, read this Rainbow, talked to Ben Balderson. We had a very nice conversation about the battery that we live on. I mean, really, yes. Let's call it the battery. It's this idea that, like, I actually think that whatever it is that is causing all these issues in our life, these problems, it is essentially stealing the magnet. It is demagnetizing our realm. It is sucking the life force out. And you can put that back in alignment, that you can basically turn back on that magnetic field. Let's call it the battery. Let's call it the battery.
Hey everybody, what is happening? I'm going to read a quote from Wilhelm Reich, one of his many. Here we are. The character structure of modern man who reproduces a 6,000-year-old patriarchal authoritarian culture is typified by characterological armoring against his inner nature and against the social misery which surrounds him. This characterological armoring of the character is the basis of isolation, indigence, craving for authority, fear of responsibility, mystic longing, sexual misery, and neurotically impotent rebelliousness. Well, there you have it. One of the best from Sir Wilhelm Reich, who basically founded Orgone. So get ready for the interview with Mitch, the Orgone Donor.
Hey everybody, welcome to Rising from the Ashes. This is the homie Romy, this is the Patreon Plus. I hope you brought your pen and your paper because today you are gonna need notes. Let's go. Today we got Mitch, the man on a mission, making the moon magic happen again, reseeding the simulated skies with organic and orgasmic energy to replenish the mind of Gaia and the future of the grand understanding itself. In the time of questionable societal awakening, it seems his mission is burning bright like the radiation phenomenon that is the Orgone Energy itself. Now you, Mitch, you have a blunderbuss of goodness on your website, and you are a real activist in the sense of the word and the nature itself. And I want to start by saying thank you so much. Absolutely 100% a blessing to be chatting with you today, sir.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and it's my pleasure. So yeah, I love having an opportunity to run my mouth. And anyone who's followed my work probably has figured that one out by now. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. And there's a lot going on right now. We're changing seasons. For some people, they're kind of stuck in the same season they've been in for a very long time. But the point being that as we shift the seasons of time, a lot of the content I think we'll discuss today is all the more relevant. So I'm excited.
Sweet. Yeah, no, it's funny you say that too, actually, because up here, I'm in Mendocino, California, Northern California, and we didn't have a winter. Like it has been basically a perpetual fall, spring kind of vibe going on the whole time. Like we didn't frost. Never once did I go out in the morning and was there frost on the ground. I live in the fucking mountains, so it's really strange. And yeah, before we jump into like just all of the like geoengineering stuff, you know, even though if people have listened to your show on Inversion or Higher Side Chats, you know, that if they listen to this show, they probably have those ones in their wheelhouse. They have a little bit of a history of, you know, you were in Chicago and you saw fucking results with Orgone in it, and it got you fucking going. But I was wondering if we can get a little bit more, maybe a little deeper history of like this anarchist fuel that you have inside of you, which I love because your website has blogs, and blogs are great. I love reading. And like you say, you like to run your mouth in the sense of like you have a way with your words and understanding your emotions. And I'm the same fucking way. I've been an anarchist since I was a kid, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better term. But I knew that there was something just wrong with the proverbial pot of the police state situation that we're in. And I was just wondering, maybe if you're comfortable giving us just like the full history of how you got to where you are today and how Mitch, the Orgone donor, got to be this huge staple. And guess what? You're going to make fucking history because you're changing the weather of an entire state with all you're doing with the Arizona project.
Well, all right, no pressure. So, yeah, for myself, I mean, when I started this back around 2015, I was living in Chicago, Illinois, and for myself, I was actually just talking about this the other day with my partner that we were talking about when we were all kids. We were having dinner with friends and talking about being kids and the questions we would ask. And I remember this conversation with an aunt of mine who said, "You know, Mitchell, you're a very smart kid," and meaning smart mouthed. And as the reason that she had said it was because I was always the type to ask a question, like a lot of kids back in the day. They would say, you know, well, why that this doesn't make sense. Like help make basically it's like an adult would say, help me make sense of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid, I always had that. And I didn't really like get into trouble because it was a time when everybody was just told to like shut up and do it, and that was the end of it. But I would just always, I always had this feeling like things that just didn't make sense. um I don't have the greatest like romantic story as to like how I had discovered what it is that I now do with all of my life. But I do have a very strong will. And I some people have heard me say this before, but I'm a Leo, and I am into some of the astrology stuff. However, being a Leo is not an excuse to be a dick. However, I am like strong-willed, and I like to prove a point. If I'm trying, I want to prove something right or I want to prove something wrong. I'm the type that like I my biggest pet peeves in the world are I don't like to be blamed for something I didn't do, and I don't like someone taking credit for something I did do. And those are
Ooh.
two of my biggest weaknesses, I think. And so basically, like in this most simplistic nutshell, it's like I have the ego driven drive and want, but also like I have compassion and I want to help. And when I stumbled on this, I felt like I had my purpose. And I don't mean that in the cliche, I'm a star seed, I'm a reincarnate of Tesla. It's like, no, I could be the reincarnate of the guy that mopped toilet or cleaned toilets down the street. I don't know, but I just have this determination that like I want to do the best I can with the time I have on this rock. And I hate tyranny. I hate control. It's why I've always questioned why, like when things just don't make sense. And I just had like as a kid, it was just like you just have these glitches. As a young adult, the glitches became way too much, like a lot of people. And so I had stumbled into this thing as I was learning about geoengineering. And weirdly enough, I one day I think I was just so fed up and distressed. I did a Google search on how to stop chemtrails, where I learned about this hockey puck and the hockey puck, the tower buster, which I thought was stupid. And so being myself, I was like, well, I'm going to go prove this wrong, or I'm going to be pleasantly surprised. And I have been nothing but pleasantly surprised for the last 6+ years. So yeah, it's just the drive I have. I don't like tyranny. I don't like control. I think human beings, I dare you to find someone who believes humanity should be free more than I do. And I mean that in the fullest extent. I mean absolutely free. There are no overlords. There is no side to pick. There is no, and it's like live and let live and leave the fuck alone. That's my philosophy. Do no harm but take no shit, I think, as Mark Devlin says. And so yeah, that is the simplest explanation of like my personality that sort of brought me to where I am with this. And as I started doing these experiments and playing around with, I say playing because it has been primarily fun, not always, but I play around with this stuff. And, again, I was so pleasantly surprised. I just forced myself, like, keep going, just keep going, keep going. And the more I learned, seems like the more I learned, the less I know. But then the more I learned, I was just putting together so many different puzzle pieces. And the puzzle that I have now in front of me, I'd mentioned this before we jumped on this talk, that some of the old Mitch viewpoints and the belief system and that whole thing, they're different even in just the short amount of time that I've been doing this. And so there are some things I know we'll talk about today as well that my viewpoints are just being adjusted as more information comes to light, because the world, as everybody's probably figured it out, is just trucking along at 1,000,000 miles a minute, and sometimes we don't even know how to keep up anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole topic on its own of how the psychological takeover and warfare that's happened. There's a chronology I'm trying to come up with, and I will eventually. It's a lot of fucking work to do occult and esoteric studies and research, but a chronology as to the power and rise of occult, like magicians, workers, energy workers, and things like that from the from like the 17th and 8th century and on to get us to where we are today, because there was a height of it. And it leads me into this story I kind of wanted to talk with you about, because, obviously Wilhelm Reich is like the father of Orgone, right? But his story will never get popular by the mainstream. It just won't happen. It's not within the algorithm. But there is this story that does make the mainstream, and it's within the same time, relatively, that Wilhelm Reich was around. And I can't remember this guy's name, but he was famous for basically cloud seeding. He would go around the country, and governments, like local governments, would hire him. He would come and say, I can make your town rain, so on and so forth. And he would go into the woods, and his pot would like cook chemicals, send him up to the sky, and so on and so forth. Do you know what guy I'm talking about? What character?
I don't know his name. I've heard these stories. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so that can make it. That can make the mainstream, right? This kind of like, oh, it's over 100 years ago, so it's part of like a fairy tale now, but we can tell you about it, right? Kind of like how Disney does, and the predictive programming and stuff like that. But they will never tell the story that was happening around the same fucking time period of these things called cloudbusters that are way cooler than chemicals cooking in a pot. They look like fucking, I don't even know. They look like Ninja Turtle tubes, that you hook up to a pond and you shoot at the sky. Like, that is some of the coolest shit that's ever been made and invented. And it is so heavily suppressed.
Yeah. Even what we know about it, they don't talk about the full potential of what they can do. But I think the reason why certain stories, why certain things are accessible, this is one of those puzzle pieces that has absolutely come to light since the whole pandemic began, for me. But that is just how much of this realm is actually not physical, and how much of our problem and our solution is not physical. So even though like Orgonite is a physical thing, like what we're talking about, or the Cloudbuster is a physical thing, the other story talks about like the chemicals. It talks about this physical thing that is being added to the atmosphere, for example, like cloud seeding, which I have strong opinions about cloud seeding. There's no evidence that shows it actually increases rain production. And that's part of the, you're going to, when you go on this journey of you learn about geoengineering and what you learn about Orgone, and then comparing the two. There are two paths, I think. Well, there's multiple, but like the two main paths are what is presented and what, like, look over here. And then there's what's really going on behind that. And for example, geoengineering, it's very easy cloud seeding, because it gives the quote unquote enemy a face that I don't think that face is something we can physically see. I think what we're dealing with is something we can't physically see. I think the energy that's behind things like Orgone devices, it's that energy that is repairing and restoring Mother Nature, or helping the earth. But when you can't physically see it with your naked eye, it's like, well, then it gets written off. So people are like, okay, well, then what do we want to talk about? Oh, the government's going to spray some shit into the clouds, and they're going to seed it, and it's going to rain. And I've noticed as more people are doing what we'll talk more about the tower busting, but as more people are busting the towers and using things like cloud busters, or what we call chem busters, are increasing rain. You'll hear a lot more in the media about all of a sudden the government wants to start doing all these experiments to make it rain all of a sudden. And it's like, you could do it this whole freaking time, and you just You waited until the drought. It's like, no, you caused the drought. You're trying to swoop in as the good guy because, again, people need faces. They need something to see. And anyone who peruses my website will see that I am all about the invisible face that is behind the faces that are propped up, but it's not what we're dealing with. It's something much. It's just something much deeper. It's not physical. It's etherical or etheric. So
Well,
anyway, that's
they at least both exist at the bare minimum. They might both be possible. My studies, I don't fucking know. I could say that you could cook with the atmosphere because it's kind of like cooking, right? You're putting salt and pepper into a thing to make a dish to make some sort of outcome. So it's like it's we live in a realm, in a place, in a conscious, thick, goopy soup of so much that we barely have not even scratched the surface of really understanding. But what they have done of scratching the surface is covering up everything really, really deep and heavy so that we have to dig so fucking hard to even know a glimpse of reality or a glimpse of what the fuck is happening, that by the time we fucking get there, we're almost fucking dead. We're at fucking, we're doing this. We'll be 60 by the time we even have any sort of satisfaction, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting old. Anyways, I'm very passionate about this stuff. That's why I'm glad we're talking, because we focus a lot on like ancient history and stuff like that. So I don't really get to talk too much about this, because it's fucking infuriating when you find this is another level of control that is, it just, like, for people that are passionate about life, it infuriates you. It's they're manipulating so much with that. But so let's go back into this kind of like these hands, right? These invisible hands, left hand, right hand path, whatever, what have you. So the mainstream story is that they were able to, our government at least started it in Vietnam War. They was like, make mud, not war. They were like, we can do this. We can do war without bullets. We can go and create a monsoon over in Vietnam by using this technology, so on and so forth. Do you think that mainstream story is facade? Yes.
So I'm glad you asked that, because I can tell, like, I want to say this loud and clear for anyone who might foam at the mouth because they're probably thinking, like, what do you mean? Like, we've seen the patents, we've seen the projects, we've seen what the government admits to doing, that kind of thing. So there are two sides to this. And so I do acknowledge that. The thing I will say is that with things like this, the more you will be able to make sense of the geoengineering. Geoengineering never made sense when I was looking at all the patents and looking at the different projects they did with, I think, like Cirrus and Popeye and like, I think the hurricane they caused in Savannah, Georgia, the monsoons during the Vietnam War. I think they destroyed the Cuban sugar crop to destabilize Castro's economy. So I mean, like, there are different things going on. Like, does the government spray us with shit? I would wager that as a yes, if I were betting on it. However, there is something deeper that is terraforming the planet, that is affecting the consciousness and doing all these other much deeper level things that have a bigger scope of their impact, and they affect all life on Earth. So it's like, look over here at the government deciding to do this project. It's always the stuff that's like super easily accessible. It's like, look
exoteric.
Look at what we can talk about. And it was hard for me when the first person who got kind of helped get me into this, and it made the comment that they didn't believe chemtrails were aluminum, barium, and strontium, and I was just like, how dare you? And now fast forward, and I'm like, yeah, I don't believe they are either, and I have tons of reasons. And this is why I'd say people need to go to my website, because there's too much at this point to discuss to make absolute sense of why I would say that without looking at everything else I've compiled. But you will make more sense of this when you bust towers and you change frequencies and you remove the simplest HARP. I would just defense, because I think HARP is a military term that's meant to give, like, when we know the military is the bad guy, we look only as far as the military. It must be the military. It must be the government. It's like, for God's sakes, it's so much bigger than that. There is something so, I mean, and it's even before that, it's after the government. You got the bankers, you got the whatever, you've got the elites, the Bohemian Grove crap or whatever you got. I mean, going all, we know where that pyramid goes. It that pyramid either. This skips species or some shit. Like, and I mean, I don't know how to say it really. This is not human. So bringing it back down, the tests and the things like that, like there are experiments that have been done with things with radio waves, with what we call stratospheric aerosol injections. Those types of things, yes, they exist. To what degree those are actually what we're dealing with, I don't know. And when I run into people, I get so many questions, so many calls, texts, email, everything. And one of the most common questions is, why would these pilots do this to us? Why would they do this to their own families? And my response to them is, what makes you think that there's even a pilot in what you see up there in the sky? And then they're like, oh, they must be using drones. And I'm like, what the hell makes you think that that's a physical drone either? I've seen some weird shit over the last 6 years, stuff that you can read about in books like Wilhelm Reich's books, where he's talking about these anomalies in the sky. And anyone who deals with this type of energy, you're going to see some weird stuff. And so it raises these questions, these puzzle pieces that basically say, okay, we do not live in the realm we think we do. Nothing makes sense. This is so bizarre, and it's getting more bizarre. I mean, I don't know about you or anyone watching this, but I feel every day like I am in the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
And I mentioned this in a podcast last month, I think it was, that we don't really have, that word doesn't even do it justice anymore. There's no words to do justice to what we're all experiencing as far as like bizarre. So I think more is going to come to light as we figure out where we exactly are in this universe and what this realm actually is. That is why when you start picking apart all of these different anomalies, this isn't airplanes in the sky. This isn't pilots. This isn't the government. This isn't physical matter necessarily either. There's alchemical processes. There's etherical. There's occult witchcraft. It's bizarre. So anyway, I'm trying really hard. I'm like, I have to bite my tongue and like reel myself back in, just because, I'm at a point where it's like, I just want to scream and just be like, okay, everyone, just skip it. Like, no freshman, sophomore, junior level stuff anymore. This is beyond anything that you think about chemtrails, and that it's so much more than chemtrails, and it's hard. I feel like every day it gets a little bit, some ways it's easier to explain things, and in some ways it's harder because we get further and further into this fractal mess of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, fractal is a great way to put it. I mean, you got a pie, right? There's many pieces of the pie and also many ingredients that make each piece of that pie. It's like nothing is one side. It's not two sides. It's, it's the many fractalized facets of the fucking multiple shapes that's going on. One of the fucking, they did such a great fucking job. But one of the ways that really paints this type of simulated situation that we find ourselves in was Men in Black. Okay, so Men in Black, right? The movie, and this doesn't happen till literally the very last second of the movie. The best part of it is the last 5 seconds. I shit you not. So the whole movie, they're going after this universe, right? Or like this thing, and it's on a cat's collar the whole time, so on and so forth. The whole movie goes, and then finally the universe is returned to the alien overlords that needed this thing. Well, that was just a marble in the sack of other universes. held by this alien. And when when you kind of like, visualize a cloud buster, some of the stories I've heard about literally moving clouds out of the sky, like it's like one of those things at the hospital where you got the sand and the magnet underneath, and you're like controlling the little boat through the sand with the magnet. You know what I'm talking about? Those things. It's, if you're able to draw that, well, it's like if you're just able to keep erasing the sky to see literally something beyond that, as if it, like a dome, and then somebody's there, there's a big eyeball looking down, like, oh shit, like put more clouds over there, or whatever. It's like, holy fucking shit, like what the fuck if? And I hate simulation theory because I feel like it's a cop out. I feel like it's a cop out to say it's all a simulation, but by gum, I feel like sometimes it's just all a fucking simulation. What's your opinion on that there?
I honestly, I won't discredit that. I won't say that I don't know. My entire life, I've only ever been lied to. And that's why I can't even pick I don't even know which way to go on the field as far as the shape. I've said things about the shape of this realm before, and it gets me into trouble. And if I even just saying this, there's always someone who's livid pissed because they're like, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. It has to be this or has to be that. I'm like, I don't know. What if it's neither? What if it is a simulation? I also, people then message, they're like warning me, don't discredit yourself. And I'm like, again, I don't know because of all the bizarre things. Funny enough, I just saw the movie Dark City last night for the first time. I'd never seen it before.
Crazy.
Great, yeah. And the whole entire time I'm seeing connections to things like this and to what I do with my time, and with the towers, and with tuning, and with things like power wands that we use to create clouds or burst clouds or affect electromagnetic fields down here on the ground. And so it's like, I know that I live in an electromagnetic bubble with these bursts of energy that apparently can become matter and can be unmattered in a matter of matters or whatever. But so it's just like, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. But I know I live in the Twilight Zone. That's as much as I can. The world is shaped like the Twilight Zone for me. That's my opinion. So, yeah. I will say, sorry, I just didn't mean, I wanted to also just say, I get exactly what you mean when you say you don't want it to be the simulation theory. I agree, because it's like, I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me?
The whole time?
What? Oh, yeah, the whole time, no. So I think there's more to it. I think there's more. When just doing what I have done with the time I have, I find a lot of meaning, and I feel like there's too much meaning in this life to be that simplistic. But again, I'd be surprised. I mean, nothing would surprise me, I guess, in that sense. Nothing would. I'm trying to be open to whatever. So.
And I kind of like painted simulation theory, and that's such a blanket term, right? It's like, and the whole flat Earth, round Earth thing. It's like, come on, people, you guys get that? That's like, right and left, right? It's like they're making you choose a side, as if there is only two sides to choose. There's not. There's not. The middle path, which is the encompassing between all of the columns of understanding, Boaz and Joachim, these two pillars. Okay, there's the two pillars, and it's the whole fucking picture. Whatever. Okay, but simulation theory, or whatever, as for lack of a better term, is like, it is a simulation in the sense there is a cosmic code. There is a cosmic code that I've kind of seen a little bit with the phi ratio, Fibonacci sequence, and like, great people like Pythagoras who give these value to numbers, and in finding out that there's a consciousness that can be kind of almost understood through the magic of numbers and understanding of frequency and like a tuning. And that's what I feel like Orgone has, this kind of vibe of like, it is like this beautiful equation of resonance and frequency that is consolidated in a pure form. And I kind of want to get into that, maybe a little bit. I haven't read any Wilhelm Reich, unfortunately. I'm definitely going to buy as many books of his that I can, because he's just such a fascinating character. But what have you learned, and what is your kind of like understanding now of the Earth energy system? What have you taken away and you're starting to just encompass about electricity and energy and all of the things?
Well, so a couple of points that are like these are the most entry level you're gonna find when you start studying Reich's work. Obviously, so Orgone energy is essentially a life energy, a life force energy that it passes through everything in existence. It can be transmitted, received, accumulated, generated, but it is essentially the flow of the natural flow of life that runs through this universe. And then, of course, there is a inversion to that would he called it.
Mitch cuts out here for just a second. Sorry.
It's not. I mean, radioactivity produces it, radiation produces it, things like cell towers produce it. It's that electrosmog. It's that crap that you just look at it, it's crap, it feels terrible. It's because it's lifeless. So this energy, as it passes through everything, what it's made me come to understand about like this realm is that everything has a natural process, including ourselves, and the advancement of everything, including our consciousness, our advancement as a species, for the actual greater good, meaning like for the good of like whatever created us, and whatever is all about the absolute truth and all about about absolute love. I think absolute truth is love. That is my definition of love, because love is sometimes not comfortable. It's the truth, you know? So this stuff, that this energy that passes through us and keeps everything in balance, has been thrown completely in chaos. And it's been thrown into chaos intentionally. And what things like these tools do, while there are obviously, in my view, there are what I call weapons that are meant to throw off that energy and chain reaction everything out of alignment with its natural existence. And then there are tools like this to kick it back into its natural existence. So it's my understanding of this universe, because of Reich's work, is that, you know, there's a rhyme and a reason for everything. We operate, we exist, we thrive when we are at our fullest potential. The fullest potential meaning like us and every single living thing in existence. That's only doable when you have the natural flow of this life energy that coerces through the entire universe. So I feel like we're stuck in a realm that it's been able to be shut off, or not shut off. It's been able to be transmuted. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It is essentially just one big game of playing, you know, we're just playing badminton back and forth. And, you know, eventually we need to just like cut down the fucking, the net, and just like go smack the shit out of whoever's on the other side. So anyway, that's kind of where I am as far as like the operational process of this realm, and turning everything back onto its natural cycle, to its natural energy form.
Yes, I'm pleased. Let's do that. You know, I at the end or whenever, like I really want to just make sure we give the platform where people can sign up to help, because we need to create this all over the map and all over the grid. But before we do that, I have some notes, and I kind of want to ask these crazy questions I got in here. I feel like Wilhelm Reich and Aleister Crowley are kind of like inversions of each other, in the sense of like Wilhelm Reich was this scientist, but like had this really fruitful upbringing to get him to where he was. He had to go through these traumas, like a lot of trauma early on in his life, yet he still found the power of orgasm and this power of energy and this life and light energy, as opposed to Crowley, on the other hand of it, was like this kind of like ghoulish and dark energy, with sex magic and understanding the power of the orgasm, but for not so benevolent purposes, right? It seemed like from time to times the Thelemites were, like I'm not saying they're bad people, but they just kind of had iffy things. But the thing I'm noticing too, even with our buddy um Tesla, Nikola Tesla, did Wilhelm Reich, did his I guess energy and health degrade as he got older? Because when you're working with things like this, you think you would be thriving and healthy forever and for a long time. But Tesla, Crowley, and Reich, from what I could tell, almost had a slipping of energy at the end and slipping of health. Was that true for Reich?
Well, I'm trying to think the best way to answer this. Because first, I'll say, given how I feel today, doing what I do and seeing other people want to high five me, but they don't want to get off their butt and help,
Mm.
is very frustrating. It's very daunting. And seeing towers go up, seeing forest fire, well, arson being done in the forests, watching the climate hoax be pushed, watching the minerals and materials that are needed in order to make these things to save the planet are all disappearing now because
Yeah.
of all the, so it's like when I see that, I'm at my wit's end, and I'm battling my own issues that I could understand. As far as like the most simplistic term, being down in the dumps, I could understand that. In regards to those individuals and their lifelong work, I'll look at Reich first. Everyone who researches Reich knows that he was thrown in prison. They know that he was essentially, or he was allegedly murdered just before he was released.
Mm-hmm.
The rumors, of course, I'm saying allegedly because when you look into it more, it's not as black and white as what people say. For example, everyone thinks that he was thrown in prison because of the Orgone accumulator box, where he was, the refrigerator sized box people sit inside, and he was curing cancer or healing. We can't use the C word, I guess, but he was he was healing people with these health issues. And so of course the FDA comes after him. This is the most simplistic thing. And here's the thing. It's kind of like hearing, oh, there's the government, there's the boogeyman, there's the bad guy, there's what we're supposed to look at right over there. And so the FDA comes in and allegedly destroys all of his work, makes him destroy a lot of the accumulator boxes and cloud busters and things like that. He's of course considered crazy especially by a lot of his colleagues. But the more you research him, he was actually thrown in prison for like, it has to do with nuclear research. And
Holy shit.
I don't think he went to jail or I yeah, sorry. Should I
No,
did you want to say something, or should I just
keep going? I'm just mind blown because there's some
All right.
connections there that's crazy. But yeah, please continue.
All right. So, okay, so Wilhelm Reich, he did experiments with radioactivity, with radium specifically, and he never got to publish his results. But I think he was on to free energy. He was on to a free energy source, which I think was stolen from, or the idea behind it. Look up atoms for peace. You can learn about it by reading about atoms for peace, and I think it was Eisenhower. He'd written to Eisenhower while he was in prison, I think, and to talk about this. Because, and I've done experiments like this myself with the legal amounts of radioactive material I can get. For anyone that would be or anyone that would care about that, you can purchase material that's safe. But doing experiments with things to see what kind of energy or what kind of reactions you may have off of certain orgone type tools with radioactive material. And so in the same way that he was putting it inside of his accumulator boxes. Basically, the point I'm getting at is that somehow this energy, this orgone life energy, I think it's the opposite of radioactive energy. And when you have this vice versa, it's sort of like you can use one to agitate and power the other back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So then in theory, if you had something like, say, a little dinky piece of radium, you could exert energy from orgone, you could exert orgone onto that, agitate it, and produce this infinite amount of energy off of that to power, say, a car or a house. So I'm not saying that is exactly, I mean, I'll probably get ripped apart by some asshole in the emails later, but the point I'm getting at is there was something there. There was something he was onto that had to do with radiation, radioactivity, and orgone energy. And I tell people, go look up the Orgone experiment and atoms for peace. Those are two things I'm still trying to piece together myself, because
How do you spell Oriner?
Orgone. It's Oranur. And they put, basically what they did is they put radium inside of an accumulator box, and an accumulator doesn't just accumulate positive orgone energy. You have to use an accumulator not around like a cell tower, because all these people write to me all the time. They're like, oh, I really want to build an accumulator, and they live in like Las Vegas. I'm like, worst place ever for an orgone accumulator. Like downtown Los Angeles too. And so no offense to Los Angeles, but the point being is it accumulates bad energy too, or it can.
Yeah.
So there's a reason Reich put his compound up in like the most northeast part of this country in Maine, and away from radioactive testing, away from what, at least at that time in the 40s, was considered to be less radioactive. And so anyway, when they did this experiment with the radium, it was accumulating so much energy inside of this box that when they like had to abruptly stop the experiment because of the reactions it was having on the sky. It was causing what they call the DOR, deadly orgone haze in the sky. But I think he called it like the DOR emergency. But basically, he had to cut this experiment short, and then needed to find a place to put the radium. So they put it into this other little like a lead box, and put it inside of, or they put it inside of this lead box, not realizing that was like, it basically, the radium was inside of a lead box, so the radiation couldn't get out, okay? But that box was put inside of this other box thinking it was radioactive proof, but was actually another like accumulator. It operated like an accumulator. So the radiation is stuck in the box, but the energy it was accumulating can get inside. And it slowly, the orgone neutralized the radioactivity. And so it's like you can concentrate the positive energy off of that negative energy by layering it differently, because radiation does not go through things like lead. Orgone energy goes through everything. So I don't know enough about it. I mean, I probably again, someone can always tear apart everything. What I'm saying is people should go look up those things, because this goes so far beyond that. Like, when you study the Orgone experiment, it's like, oh, the FDA didn't give a shit about the accumulator box. Like, they could just easily enough say that he's a quack. Now, granted, was it destroyed? Yes. If the stories about him are all true. And again, like you just asked me about simulation Earth, flat Earth, sphere Earth, whatever, I'm like, well, I have been lied to about everything. And we all know that history is the lie agreed upon. So I have to go with my intuition that says what I have learned of everything I've learned about him is true. And right now I'll say I think it probably is. But I mean, what if it's not? What if it's not? I've heard some stuff about Nikola Tesla selling a lot of his patents to Thomas Edison, I think. And if that's true, that means that I don't think Mr. Edison was necessarily the evil doer that killed off Tesla, like everybody is led to believe. I am not saying that is how it is. I am just saying there are other stories out there, and when you hear them, you're like, oh, that's a new perspective. I did not ever hear that before. So anyway, the point, I guess I'm all over the place, so I'll try to reel it back in again. But the question you had asked about with Reich and these guys having having a deterioration of life at the end of their life, and it could be true, but I don't know. I really don't, because we also know that there's controlled opposition. I am not saying either of those individuals are, but we know that something out there wants to maintain control over a narrative, and it will fight to the death to maintain that narrative. And that's why I think things are again becoming the twilight zone. So much has been uncovered, and they've got to put it back to sleep, and they can't do it fast enough.
Yeah, I mean the amount of I mean if the in the intro I said like you know, the supposed societal awakening, you know, if it is happening, because uh, we talk a lot about, you know, astrology on here, and we get people on who know their shit, right? And there's this continuous story that we are coming into a different cyclical age. In a cyclical age, we will have an upheaval of awakening, which is happening. I am noticing a lot of people that are getting, at least opening their eyes to the concepts of, at least that they've been fucking swindled. But on the same sense of that, there's even more people getting roped into the bullshit and tied down to the hysteria. And so I'm like, is it a great awakening? Is it a great sleep? Like, is it everything all at once? But I think with the Orgone Energy, man, like I think there, you know, it can tap back into this golden age period that we had at one point, because the story of the golden age is that the earth was sitting up and down on its axis. The equatorial zone was larger. There was more plasmon energy coming through, which could correlate to orgone energy and plasma. You know, they sound like they work within the same wheelhouse of life force energy. And and there was more plants. People didn't have to eat, you know, they didn't eat meat for sure, but they were eating a lot of atmospheric energy, plants, you know, really clean water. And the only way I see us getting even close to that is by building more pyramids, switching our focus onto the earth, and understanding things like atmospheric energy and orgone and this light positivity and this light radiance and the Schumann resonance and resonance as a whole. Um, I guess what's something that's happened to your physical self outside of, like, you know, busting clouds and everything, but to your consciousness and your body, and your spiritual guide since you've been on this path?
Um, for me, uh, I mean, I guess like I was going to be on the path of, like, you know, the wake up path of just like becoming more aware the next day. Once you start, you can't stop. You can't go back to sleep, even if you try. But I will say, you know, for myself now, I see patterns in things that I'm not trying to pride myself as Rain Man or anything weird, but there's a couple individuals in my life that I can talk to about certain things. I'll use a friend of mine in Alabama as an example, that the things we talk about, where we see, if we hear something going on in the news, we know immediately the connection. It's like, oh, this is happening. This happened over here. It's an energetic thing. And they're doing it for this reason on this day with this solstice or this whatever astrological event, this occult ritual, this whatever, and they're inverting this, and they just like the snake venom thing. That was a whole ordeal. And we immediately were like, we can pull all of that in and connect it to what we're doing with a chembuster. And so, because it's just everything is about energy. And that's what, like, this has made me realize, this endeavor, what it's done is make me realize just to the extent how much this energy true, or this world truly is based on frequency. And the phrase we all say it all the time, the one that Tesla coined, that to understand the universe, understand frequency, vibration, and now of course I'm forgetting, but basically frequency.
To understand, yeah, frequency and resonance is to understand the universe, or
Yeah.
something like that.
But then even what I see is that, even, and this isn't everybody, but what I see with a lot of people who say that phrase, who tout that belief system, don't even fully grasp the extent to which that goes. That this is why I do not believe that what we're seeing in the sky is what we think we're seeing in the sky, and what we think is coming out of the back of that plane. And so it's like every single thing that has happened along this journey has just, I've been able to connect one more puzzle piece of, it's about a frequency with this. And it all boils down to us waking up, finding our purpose, finding our creator, finding our consciousness, if you want to call it the collective consciousness. I call it a battle for the soul. I really, some people don't like that. I prefer to resonate with the idea that there is something, like we're all on this journey to essentially find eternal freedom for our soul, our existence as a sovereign. I don't like the word sovereign, but we're free, mind, body, spirit. Something doesn't want that. And it's something that's not us, doesn't want that. Us, and I think our creator does. So do with that as you want. But that's my whole thing, is like every single thing that comes across my radar, my tape, across the desk, it's like, this is all about frequency, everything. Even the fires that are going on right now are all about frequency, and the vibration, the collective vibration, and connected to COVID, and connected to the, like I said, the snake venom, or connected to Ukraine. It's all connected for purposes of frequency and manipulation of energy, basically.
Well, what is the effect of magnetism and orgone play with each other? How does that
So,
work?
so when I first started, I'm glad you asked that, because when I first started doing this, it was as simplistic as saying, okay, this thing, we put it around a tower, and there's an energy field coming off of that tower. This will push and pull, it will attract and repel that energy field, that it will basically suck it in like a little scrubber sponge and spit out a new resonance. It will act like a filter, an energy field filter. Now, in regards to magnetism, doing my earth pipe project here in Arizona, what I've realized the last year is that as I've learned more about the electric universe, read the Invisible Rainbow,
Nice.
talked to Ben Balderson, we had a very nice conversation about the battery that we live on. I mean, really,
Yes.
let's call it the battery Earth, maybe. But it's this idea that, like, I actually think that whatever it is that is causing all these issues in our life, these problems, it is essentially stealing the magnet. It is demagnetizing our realm. It is
Ah.
sucking the life force out.
Mm.
And you can put that back in alignment, that you can basically turn back on that magnetic field. We've all heard people talking about the pole shift. Whether it is or isn't happening, I don't know. Whether it's going to happen, I don't know. However, it has finally dawned on me that perhaps, if it happens, it might not be happening for a natural reason. One of the greatest inversion perversion that they could cause, and they love inversion perversion in this realm, would be to flip the poles. Well, how could they do that? By basically sucking dry everything and inverting it, by putting, if you look at tower placement, the towers are so strategically placed on water sources and ley lines and everything. They've connected their own entire earth grid, or they are still constructing it, to
Hmm.
change the directional flow of all of that energy. And so everything's in complete disarray. So they're, I think that as they're depleting, essentially, they're depleting the magnetic field, and you have to find ways to then revitalize that, or to turn it back on. And I've actually just been hearing from quite a few people, from just like a gardening perspective. People are getting away from fertilizers. This is a big thing in my consciousness the last few weeks, because I learned about it, wrapping copper wire around my plants to make them grow faster.
Yeah.
That, we bury earth pipes all over the place, and they do make your flower, they'll make all your plants grow faster. Putting a chembuster around things will make them grow faster. Pyramids will make them grow faster.
I grow
But
cannabis, man.
yeah,
I'm on a big ass cannabis farm up here, so I'm finna get some earth pipes, dude, and
yeah.
sky.
I mean, it all, I mean, it's like you're essentially reintroducing magnetism, or the natural magnetic field, back into whatever. If you think of, I am not a magnetics expert, but in my view, I'm thinking that everything that we are supposed to be attracted to and that is supposed to come, everything we're supposed to resonate with, that's essentially a magnetic charge. We
Mm-hmm.
are either attracting or we're repelling. Something's trying to artificially attract stuff to us and repel the stuff that we're supposed to be attracting. And so again, and it's like, well, I would equate that to essentially life or death energy, because it's like, what do we need to thrive? What do we need to live? You know, I don't know enough about it that I could say like magnetism is orgone, but I know that this life energy is essentially a magnetic field. So yeah, it's I guess to answer your question then just about the magnetics, like it's, I think with like what I'm doing here in Arizona is essentially remagnetizing the desert, because it's been, you know, we used to have things that would do it for us. We used to have trees, some quite tall. If the thing I see outside my window is actually a gigantic tree stump, I'm thinking it is. And so they want to destroy all these things, these energy generators, these uh, these natural formations that would basically take care of that for us, and they keep everything in balance with the pushing and the pulling of all these magnetic fields. That's what they've essentially sucked dry, I think.
Yeah, there's something to that too, because they talk about when we're the golden age period, when the Earth was at its its perfect axial point, right, when it was straight up and down. Well, something threw it off of its axis. What threw the Earth off of its axis? Was it the moon? Like some stories are, and I know you like the moon, and weird shit about the fucking moon, and I'm right there with you, dude. But I sometimes believe that the moon was thrown into our orbit to throw us off of that axiom that we were on, so we would be completely controllable. Like you can control the atmosphere of the magnetic poles when you throw in an extra piece of heavy metal, right?
Mhm.
So we know that. And wow,
I, I
thinking.
have to I
Oh
have to
yes.
ask, when you, the way you said, you were being facetious, right? I think you've probably heard me talking about the moon, because
Oh yeah.
I get into so much trouble with it. Living in Sedona, the amount of people, like, I actually take all I
Hippie
take
central for sure.
I will never leave my crystals outside in the full moon. I think that is not a good idea. And we've been doing our planting with the new moon cycle, and something that's worth considering. You know, I had a friend he's a Native American, talking about he would do all of his crops based on the new moon, talked about how you get bigger yield, faster growth. And I never really asked questions on why. But then I thought, well, if I think during those moments of the new moon cycle, the moon's magnetic pole is actually a lot weaker than ours. And so it's like everything you're planting, sprouting, growing in that cycle is in this different cycle that keeps it sort of going, just going in motion in that cycle that it's supposed to do, that it's like it's its natural thriving cycle, or it's closer to its natural thriving cycle. I'd heard that people who conceive during new moons, or more people conceive during the new moons, people are more fertile. And I haven't seen any like concrete studies to show that people conceived during new moons are different than those that are not. But I'd be interested to see, because the if the life, it's like the magnetic pole here is stronger and everything seems to be thriving or growing. It's like plants are more fertile, people are more fertile. How interesting is that? Then when it's
Mm.
like a full moon at its brightest, for that tells me do not put your crystals outside in the full moonlight. You're going to be you're you're taking
Sucking
something
away.
out of them.
Yeah.
You're doing the opposite of what you think. Another inversion that was probably
Mm.
introduced. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't tell anybody in Sedona that I said that. But I mean, it's just because that's everybody here. They go by that other cycle. I used to think that. Not that I was never very big on putting crystals in the moonlight anyway. But when I did, especially in Chicago, I was like, oh, it's this full moon tonight. And then I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
You want to heat? You want to charge your crystals? I got a good way for you guys. Get your fireplace going and put them on a pot of hot ass water. And when you pull them out of the hot water, they feel charged up. I think heating up the crystals in water, and sometimes I'll throw some salt in there and stuff. And yeah, like that's the way I'd noticed. You know, I haven't looked at it on a microscope level, but I do know that when you heat something up, it moves the molecules around, you know, at a faster vibratorial rate. So that's what I do. For the moon thing, though, it's like, yeah, we have a large attachment to it, and especially in this, you know, I've lived in Hawaii for a long time, and we'll be moving back probably in November, to do a farm and to fucking build some little pyramids and to do all the things. I want to Earthworks Hawaii, with some rods and everything, and maybe I'll fly you out there to come stay. We're trying to build like a little retreat, and so it'd be really cool to, like, you know, get you out there and like maybe like talk to people and how we can help the community and start something. You know, that would be really cool, something you're interested in. But the moon is an anomaly. It's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. It's a motherfucking anomaly. The moon is an anomaly. It just like the Earth, we don't know what the fuck it is. We told it's a thing, but like you said, we're lied to about everything. So what the fuck is it? And I think it might have more negative connotations than it does positive connotations, especially if it's the reason that we are off of our, you know, our straight Earth, and we're here. And that's the reason why there's not as much orgone or plasma energy. And it's a control station, you know, or it's a watch station. You have an interesting story that you were basically moving clouds around with the Buster, and you noticed some weird stuff with the moon. You want to tell us that story?
Yeah, so by 2016, I knew that there were fake clouds, and there are most clouds I think in the sky may actually be just electrified fake. I get in trouble with that opinion now too, but there's moisture in the air that can be used to make. I think that most clouds are magnetized and manipulated in such a way that they can cover the sun or the moon, without it having to be an obvious chemtrail, or without it having to be that really obvious like white indented stuff that looks like grill marks on the flat lifeless crap in the sky. But it was early on, I think like June of 2016 or something, that I noticed like, they always increase chemtrail spraying like exponentially 24 to 48 hours prior to every full moon. And then I started noticing that it was with the new moon as well. What I have found since then, it's still consistent with the full moon. The new moon, I sometimes wonder if they're short staffed or something, because it seems like every once in a while they let one through. But anyway, it was my first chembuster that I built, and everyone who, go to my website if you haven't seen a chembuster. It looks like, if I can say, I think it looks kind of like a Gatling gun. It's a 6-barrel gigantic. If Wilhelm Reich were here, he called his the space gun, and it's not a cloud buster, but it's a chembuster based on that cloud buster. And so anyway, it looks,
How many rods?
6.
6.
So
you said that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's an etheric bazooka. And so when I was aiming this, I was comparing as many notes as I could with the very limited information I could get from people at that time, like Don and Carol Croft, or from George Ritchell. I recommend people. Don and Carol have unfortunately passed since then, but George is still around to Organize Africa. And then just like anywhere I could scoop up something. I was just every day would just spend all day trying to consume information and compare notes with things. What are people doing? So I started playing around with a chembuster, and I was aiming it at the moon, and I noticed that it had disintegrated these clouds, or this cloud formation that was over the moon. And I thought, okay, so that's fake. And I noticed after it started to disintegrate, this other one in another area of the sky started moving towards the moon to cover it again. And I thought, oh, the wind is like blowing it over there. And I'm like, so I reposition it, and you can watch it in real time start to disintegrate. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so like that one was fake too. Well, then I see like another cloud formation in a different part of the sky start going over towards the moon. So I aim towards that one to start disintegrating it. And then I see all these other patches in every direction that they all just start going for the moon. And I freaked out because I'm like, this has nothing to do with wind. There is no way that none of that stuff is moving with wind because it's going every single direction, and it's all going strategically to cover the moon for whatever reason. And part of my journey in all of this, again, puzzle pieces, was to watch the documentary Shoot the Moon from Crow.
Yeah, Crow.
And I can, that's just one of the many building blocks. That, and actually this book, Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight, I'd recommend people read that one too. It's like, I don't know why they're blocking it. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's a physical thing. I've heard it's only 100 miles above our ground. I'm not sure if that's true either. But I just started to find these consistencies with covering the moon, and I'd heard things about satellites. I'd heard things about radioactivity and frequency, and doing something to broadcast a frequency that was working with the tower network on the ground. I never really stopped to look at that specifically, because eventually I got to the point where I'm like, a tower is a tower is a tower. They're all bad. There is no such thing as a good one, and they're all a part of HARP. But anyway, the point being that the moon, look at the patterns: new moon, full moon. Look at the chemtrails. If you live somewhere that they're not spraying, then be extremely mindful of those dates when those moon cycles happen. Same thing with eclipses, and then the same thing with sunrise and sunset. And it's really sad what's going on with the sunrise and the sunset right now, because they've basically taken that away from most people. There's always an increase in, if you look out in the horizon at those prime times, they've blocked the sunrise and the sunset, so people can't even sun gaze anymore. And it's like, so that again tells me, okay, is that an aluminum, barium, and strontium? Or is there an etheric thing going on? What is it about this energy? What is it about our consciousness? What are they stopping from us cosmically sensing? And so it doesn't give you all the answers, but it at least tells you that by deductive reasoning, these certain explanations they give you on paper from your evil nemesis, the government, they don't add up. It's like, it doesn't stop there, and then you're kind of at a brick wall,
Yeah, so I kind of vibe with what you're saying, definitely on the etheric reasoning or potential reasoning behind the chemtrails. It's like, if we live in a realm where the communication is constant and we are able to communicate with each other through intuition and our consciousness connecting, right? Energy connecting. If our fields are able to connect, then it would make sense that if they wanted to control that and to dampen it down, that they would disrupt it with these different, powders or softeners or something like that. Same with how they treat and manipulate the water and the water treatment systems. You can't talk to anybody. They sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, if you work at the water treatment plant. Like, you can't really openly talk about all the liquid metal softeners they're putting in there. And what that does is that clearly dampens down the energy and realigns the crystalline energy, or damn near, might I say, the orgone energy, the aligning energy in the water. And, atmosphere is water. It's a different viscosity, in my opinion. The atmosphere, in my opinion, is a form of water vapor. So, we're just in a different density than we are living in the water. And we know how that works to disrupt the flow. So let's get into the Orgonite and the Orgonate. Like, the differentiate, like, to us, so we can know if we want to make it, what the do's and the do nots are.
Yeah. So I guess regarding the Orgonaut, if anybody's new to that term, I didn't make up that term either. I lifted that. Other people, you're going to hear things when you start researching anyone who's doing this. But Orgonaut means just simply a piece of Orgonite or an orgone device that usually it doesn't have enough metal in it. And you need to have a decent composition of metal. I'll show you a couple of things here. The first one, so this is a tower buster. This is a standard tower buster. It is made with a catalyzing resin that will harden into essentially plastic. and metal, some kind of metal shavings.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two main components you need to make a decent piece of what we would call orgonite. I don't use that term because there's a dick who, I shouldn't say it like that. There's a guy who is known as a parasite in this circle who the government allowed to trademark that name that doesn't make any damn sense. And because it is a household item that anyone can make, and it existed for quite a while, and it was like almost, I think it was retroactively given a trademark when people started catching on to using it. Whole sketchy can of worms with that. Yeah, people have to dig for what I'm getting at with that. But anyway, I call it an orgone device. I call it an orgone tower buster. I don't like to use the word orgonite that much. So anyway, it's some kind of metal shaving, some kind of resin, and then you have quartz crystals, any form of quartz crystals. It can be crushed, it can be little points, crystal points, a little tiny scoop. It doesn't have to be much of anything. Some people use sand too.
How pure of quartz does it have to be? Because like I run into a lot of quartz, but it's all different kind of quartz.
Well, there are, through the grapevine, there are people that will tell you like what you pick up here in the desert going for a hike would work. I lean that way. I agree with them.
Okay.
However, the more I get on this magnetic stuff, I've been making a lot more that look more like this, or I've got like a black tower buster that these have black powder, magnetite powder in them. They still have aluminum shavings, because as long as you have some kind of metal shavings, aluminum, brass, steel,
does it have
iron.
To be shavings?
So you want it to be small.
Okay.
The reason you want it to be small, like, I mean, this is what I would call fleck. I mean, it's like pencil sharpener shavings are smaller. This is quite a bit smaller than that. The reason is because in the same way that an orgone accumulator box, the refrigerator size box that people sat in, those layers of how those walls were made that would pull that energy to the center of the box and harness it. Well, if you look at this, think of every layer that's between every molecule of resin and every fleck of that metal. There's a lot of push pull. There's a lot of, that action pulling and pushing this energy field. I don't know that this is the best explanation for it, because I've heard so many explanations about how does this work over the years. And what I have come to on my own little thing, and some people don't like it, but is that the smaller the metal you're using, you would essentially have more surface area of those metal particulates. So therefore, you're going to have more layers. You're going to have more of that reaction. And so it doesn't mean that a piece of orgonite like this is bad. It means that a tower buster like this is like the go-to universal tool that you would use to bust a tower. But things like this, you start to make them better and better and better.
Yeah,
and
you refine the art.
It's like exactly. And so unfortunately, there will always be people that are going to say like, oh, you're telling me that other one isn't good. And it's like, no, they're still good.
Mm-hmm.
They still get the job done. But as anyone can see from going outside of their house, the towers are getting bigger. The concentration of EMF is getting worse. So sometimes, I mean, like, I'm kind of at a point, like a lot of people gifting, where we try to beef things up a bit. And that's why, like in the case of my earth pipe project for around Arizona, it was like, I'm going to kill it with fire, and I'm going to bury thousands of these things all over the state, which I did. And so it's like annihilating everything that gets in its path, any towers that they put up. So anyway, you can do things to beef this up, but essentially you want your metal, you want your resin, and you want some form of quartz. And there was a question you'd also ask, people are going to hear the 50-50 rule. So when you look at this piece, half of this device is composed of metal shavings. The other half is the resin. There's really not a lot of room for there to be anything else. And so when you do something like this, I mean, this is much heavier than this. This is about 3 times heavier because the metal powder is more dense.
Yeah.
But it's like, you want to eyeball it to where you have about half and half. And the reason for that is the orgone devices work based on the metal. So, I mean, the resin is an organic substance and it is attracting energy, and this is why resin is necessary for this. But a piece of orgonite that we've talked about, a non-piece, a piece that is non-functional, is typically what you'd buy at a crystal store here in Sedona that doesn't have enough metal in it, and they're usually exorbitantly expensive.
Yeah.
And they have nothing in them. They're crystals encased in plastic, and like a pyramid. This is God, this is heavy. So this is an example of a pyramid that I just recently made. This entire layer here at the top is copper, and the next one's brass, the next
Holy
one's
shit.
the next one's zinc, and the next one under that is a mixture of a couple things. I don't whatever, it's irrelevant right now. It's incredibly heavy, it's incredibly dense. There's crystals that are popping out the top and on all the sides, and I also put a copper plate on the bottom. There's a rhyme and a reason. I think I might sell this in my shop soon for people that want something to go nuclear on their house. But that is like that is like, oh, that's more than you need. That's more than you would need to do. That's incredibly dense. There's clearly layers. There's a layering effect in addition to it being a pyramid, in addition to the resin being mixed with all of those metal particulates as well. So it's like,
What is the layering? What is like the principal
well,
kind of aspect of making layers?
so it depends. I think I'm going to say specifically to pyramids. What I had learned, part of this journey, one of the names I came across was Ken Rolla, and I haven't talked about him in a while. But Ken, I listened to a bunch of his presentations on pyramids, and there are, I'm pretty sure it was he who said it, that the shape of the pyramids, regardless of what a pyramid is made out of, it will begin to pull a resonance from the earth when you put it on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of then doing it with these magnetic materials, doing it with the layering of an organic and an inorganic material, putting crystals into the middle. I mean, there's a coil running down the center of that pyramid with a quartz point. I don't have one with me here, but it's like 2 inches long. It kind of looks like the one on this little box here. It's like 2 inches by 3/4 inches thick, that runs down the center of it. And you've got pressure being applied on that as well from the resin. So, it's like when you combine all that stuff, it's like you get a pretty top-notch piece or you get a pretty good orgone device.
Yeah.
So,
What about the life expectancy on these? Like, does it run out? Does it get
so
too full?
I don't personally, I'm going to say no. And the reason for that is because what it's really doing, it's not so much, people will say it's a generator, an orgone generator versus an orgone accumulator. I think in a way it's an energy transfer, it's an energy changer.
Yep.
And so like, because like if you research like Dawn and Carol Croft that I mentioned, Carol was a psychic. She and I'm sometimes I say certain words that are triggering words to people. I don't care whether they agree with someone who is a psychic or not. It's worth looking into because she was one of many psychics who had talked about the energy coming off of cell towers, and that when you put things like orgonite around these cell towers, that this toroidal field around them, it changes. And I mean, of course it changes, but it's like they could physically see it.
Yeah.
And they found that what it was doing was it was converting that tower into a positive energy generator. Almost, they never said this before, but fast forward to today, when I think about it, it makes me think that cell towers are, in a way, I think they're like an inverted pyramid that would have been built back in the day. They have essentially built the bastard pyramid, but it's not a pyramid. It's just a pole in the ground with these panels that emits a frequency, creates a field, and then draws the energy into all those cables that go down into the ground, connected to the water sources, connected to the ley lines, connected to all those energy points. So it's changing what they've talked about is that it is essentially changing those frequency weapons into being a positive energy generator as long as the stuff stays around it. So I know that, I mean, there are things we've gifted. I can tell based on what's on the mountaintops around here, where they struggle to fill the sky, where they have the hardest time, or where they try to exert as many of those grill marks in the sky as they can. And I have found that a lot of the places we've gone, it looks like it's still working. And a lot of the reactions we've had like this whole year. I mean, this last year we had one of the wettest years on record. We had just a super awesome monsoon season after they said it was going to be like one of the worst as far as dry, and it was going to be one of our worst fire seasons. Neither of those things happened last year. They're trying to play catch up right now. But even with a dry winter, like a lot of people, we still had quite a bit that they've been trying to torch Flagstaff. I'm sure if anybody's watching this and they've heard about a Flagstaff fire, there's stuff going on that people don't really know about. And a lot of those trees were so saturated that if you go up there, and they're barricading things off with goons from I'm not even sure who these government agents were, but you can see trees that it's like they tried to burn them and they wouldn't burn. And so it's just like you'll see like patches of where just basically I think they're simulating more of a fire for the viewpoint on the interstate. So people drive by and they're like, oh my God. It's like, no, because there's no smoke, no fire, and everything's barricaded off all around. Coincidentally, I'm all over the place, but I think there's a particle accelerator up the hill at Flagstaff. And if you watch FPV Angel, which I know a lot of people who watch this probably are familiar with FPV Angel, I believe it. I believe there is a particle accelerator up the hill, and they're currently staking it out and protecting it. And it's just a whole can of worms. But anyway, so you put this stuff around the towers though, and it essentially it converts the tower. And it's in perpetuity. It will keep going and going and going.
It reminds me of a literal transistor when when you're running electrics, like running wire, and you're running wire from a not so heavy point, and you need it to get really far. You have to have a transistor in the middle, and it basically picks it up and reshoots it out. So something along the lines of that. And I wanted to kind of touch more on something we just glossed over earlier, but the esoteric layout of these things, of the towers. We know the roads were built by the Masons specifically to connect different mound sites or different lodges, different sacred sites, so towers sometimes correlate to roads too, they have that layout. But you just said something really interesting, is the not the Hadron Collider, but the particle accelerator. What was it that you said?
There's a belief that there is a particle accelerator up the hill towards Flagstaff, between Sedona and Flagstaff, Arizona.
Have you ever tried to Google Earth it or check it out like that?
We've walked the forest ourselves and just gifted the shit out of it with Earth Heights.
Nice.
So I'm just saying over the last 3 years, and it's getting harder and harder every year. But there
for
are
them
places
or for you?
For us, because they guard places. Like last year, they were trying to set fire to stuff. We ended up going up to Payson. We got to a point where basically we were turned away, and the alternative was to drive out of our way about an hour, and then where we did get out, had to get out of the car and walk for 2 hours, and you've got backpacks and hiking gear and whatever, and it's a lot of work, that's the reason nobody wants to do this. And still managed to get done what we wanted to get done. But it's like I've talked about the climate lockdown. This is the climate lockdown. They will guard all of the places on Earth that they're going to torch. So they need to be gifted, and they need to be gifted with Orgonite soon. So that's my sound the alarm or whatever. That's my 2 cents on that.
I got a couple things to touch up on that. It's so I had an experience driving up the 101 last year. Was heading to Oregon. I lived in Portland for a long time. I'm a West Coast boy. I was born in Washington, lived in Oregon. Now I live in California. I'm just fucking at Hawaii, like, which is the most West Coast you can go. Like, I'm all about the West Coast, man. Like, I think I was a Lemurian in a past life, but there's a lot of energy out here. The vibes are tight. Uh, volcanic energy. I'm addicted to that shit. Which reminds me, earlier you were talking about Wilhelm Reich's potentially of like studying nuclear energy. An alchemist that I study and I really enjoy is Fulcanelli, who was a French alchemist in that same period, the same fucking time period, right? Same with Jack Parsons. They were all Wilhelm Reich, Jack Parsons, and Fulcanelli. They were all around the same fucking time period. They were all doing very occultic things. And in theory, Wilhelm Reich, this is a cult, right? Like it's a cult in the sense of it's kind of hidden. It's esoteric more than a cult, right? It's not exoteric in the sense of it's mainstream. It's esoteric. It's hidden underneath a little bit, right? Anyways,
Yeah.
whatever the fuck, that was a super random because I was going into the West Coast, the National Forest. So after COVID, I was driving up the 101 with my friend, and she had to we wanted to like get out and like change the baby and all the things, and we take a random right. We get on this road, we get to this national forest. The gate is open. And I was like, I thought all national forests are closed right now because of COVID, which is fucking ridiculous, anyways, right? Which makes me think further into this agenda to where they're blocking things off, and kind of like what you're talking about there. Makes me wonder what's really going on deep in the forest and the national parks and those esoteric layouts where these national parks are and why they have these borders, call them national fucking parks on these highways, these roads. Here we go. And we got stopped by feds. They had guns. They didn't pull the guns out, but they had guns. They weren't park rangers. They were federal agents. And they like interrogated us, like, why did you guys come in here? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, you guys fucking left the gate open. Like you didn't, like you guys left the gate open. I didn't hop a fence, dude. And like we have a baby. We have a baby. And then another thing was you talk about fires. Welcome to hell where I'm at, bro. Like this is fire central. So many fires happen here that it's not surprised everybody's used to fires. That's a problem, but it's so true. I've seen it. I've had multiple days where the sun is blacked out by fucking smoke, and the entire tent of everything is a red tone. Like I've lived in that for multiple days in a row, weeks at a time. But there was this one, I was working at a farm up in Covelo, California, and it was how was it 2 years ago, the August complex fire, which was at that time they always do it bigger every year. They're like they get a bigger complex fire every year, takes out more hundreds of square miles of fucking forest. The feds wouldn't let people onto their properties. The fire wasn't anywhere near it, but they would guard the road with guns, holding them like this, not letting people go onto the roads where their properties are, even though the fire is like miles and miles away. It's shit like that, dude, that like is just like, what are you guys what are you guys hiding?
I know that it's not fair to give, conjecture and assumptions, but I don't care what anyone says. There is no such thing as a wildfire. They don't just happen. They're arson. They don't just happen. People always want to say lightning. What happens when the lightning hits the ground is it recharges the magnetic field on the earth. And people, I think, assume, because they see it on the TV. Oh, it happened in a movie scene.
That's the only place it'll fucking happen.
It's like, no, it's electricity, it's not the same. Like they don't realize what it takes for the combustion and the flame that's needed. And I'm not saying like, yeah, if you throw, they always want to make people like, oh, it's a cigarette. Someone threw a cigarette out the car window. They'll get bent. No. And now I think, there were a few things I wanted to say, and then I was debating, but after the experience, we went gifting in Phoenix and Scottsdale. Today is Tuesday. We went on Thursday of last week, and we did quite a bit, and it was a nightmare to be to a big place like Phoenix for the first time in about a year, not quite a year. And then going up to Flag which is where we ran into the Goombas. And basically, well, I'm trying to think of what I'm getting at. The fires, I think, honestly, I think it's the Forest Service. People want to say, I've heard people accuse firemen of doing it, and I talked to Mike over at Alpha Vedic about that because he's a fireman, and I was like, no, it's not them. That would be too easy to suspect. I think it's the ones who are supposed to be busy looking after the forests, but then I also think something's been infiltrated. Same goons that would have guns blocking people from their homes in places like that, that I think they're setting fire to those people's houses. They don't want people to see what's going on. They need people, they're doing something to get people moving exponentially quickly from the west to the center of, and they're all going to be strategically positioned in their FEMA district 1, 2, 3, and so it's yeah, I don't know.
They're
People
definitely
want,
planning on that in Cali some way, like with the
yeah.
fucking way
Well, and it's
they're
a
running
food,
the gas and
yeah.
oh my
You
god.
you are essentially our food supply. People underestimate how much is grown in Arizona too. They think it's all just desolate desert. It sure as shit wasn't after last year. We had a vegetated boom. I mean, we had and actually, because I know we're hopping all over the place. I did want to like whatever I think you said the words freestyle earlier, but I want to like talk about how you mentioned earlier that you guys didn't really have a winter. Something I want people to walk away from this conversation with is the possibility. So we here in Arizona last year, we had a fairly mild winter starting in January of 2021. The first 6 months, I was cranking out earth pipes like crazy. I connected with so many people around the state. And what we did is we essentially moved southwest and started hitting those portions of the state where the jet stream begins and carries up this way into the
Oh,
rest of the state. Needs lots of someone's to start planting earth pipes all over the damn place, and that would definitely get things moving. But aside from that, so when we started doing that, we we had our spring. After the winter, we had our spring, we had summer, we had this booming water season, we had extreme wildlife. Everything came down from the mountains once again. You could go for a walk in the middle of the day and you couldn't not see a family of deer. I hadn't seen that since like right on the cusp of visiting here before I moved here 3.5 years ago. And then it was like they were gone. And then it was like, oh, well, this last year they were back and they're still, you can go for a walk and now see wildlife again. We had a butterfly boom that you couldn't drive without your windshield being just caked with, unfortunately, with butterflies. We had hummingbirds, the regular bird patterns, all these different creatures in abundance. Right now, this year, it's bees. I have 10,000 bees sitting outside my house collecting pollen off of my junipers and evergreens. And but the point I'm getting at is we had winter, then we had spring, we had summer, and it was super abundant. Then in the fall, we didn't have a fall. We had a spring, and it was a beautiful spring. And then after, it was like a second spring essentially. And then it took forever after the fall for winter to really be winter. And it was just another prolonging of spring, a little bit drier spring than the fall spring, but it was essentially another spring. And now here we are again going into this spring. And it's like, it's just overall, it's just beautiful. So the point I'm getting at is I have wondered for the last few years as the energy changes, what's been manipulated and to what extent. And it makes me wonder, while I know a lot of people have had dry winters, I've noticed a lot of people around the US especially, they had a fairly mild spring, summer that was hot, but then fall that was spring. But they were being told that their fall that was kind of warm and like spring, they were like, oh, climate change. And I'm like, no. I'm like, I am wondering now if the seasons are shifting in a way, like I'm not convinced that there are seasons where shit just dies. Like I wonder how much of this cycle, what if it's just like and right now for us, it's like we had spring, winter, spring, summer, spring, winter. So it's like you do still have a polar, you have an opposite there where some stuff dies in the winter, but not really. I mean, we still have a lot of vegetation. And again, they're trying hard to burn trees and cause all this climate crap. And I don't think it's going as easily as they had hoped for. And so, we had so much flooding last year. We had primary water coming back to the surface. I heard from people all over the state about their washes and rivers and all these places they lived for 25 plus years. And they're like, Mitch, I've never seen a drop of water run through this river. And all of a sudden everything's booming. And it's like I've talked recently about how they're changing the frequencies to prevent primary water from coming to the surface. And I think we can pull it back up in the same way that pyramids do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think in Egypt, if they could fix the pyramids, whatever they did to them, fix them, and that whole thing would be an oasis. Same thing here. I look around at all these tree stumps and I'm like, the only way that this place could accommodate the amount of water that I think this place actually gets, it's like there's so much moisture that would fall, and there used to be so much vegetation before it was desertified and terraformed.
Mm-hmm.
So to accommodate it. So anyway, the point I'm getting at in my incredibly long-winded speech is that people need to be mindful, don't just listen to what the government or the idiots on TV are saying about your seasons or about the temperature outside. Look at it as a collective whole, because it's like I'm seeing, based on all the emails I get and all the research I do, I am seeing seasons like the earth is trying to extend its life cycle for vegetation, for life. It's trying to extend the growing patterns in the growing season, and there may not be a cycle of death in our seasons. It's a right now it's, I guess, just a hypothesis, but I've seen some things that don't add up. So
It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the golden age period that, all of the ancient theologies tell us about, that there was this golden age, and it's like they didn't have seasons in that golden age. What changed that? It has been brought onto us. It is damn near, I say, manipulated onto us to make us think that there has to be. I think a natural flow of like ebb and flow is natural and fine, but complete darkness, and then look at like, these things like the dark winter, which has been talked about for decades. Like Bush Sr. said things like dark winter in his speeches and things like that. They just repeat themselves because it's a fucking mantra of black magic. And you know what I mean? But yeah, so I totally dig that. And I need to reiterate that. That's a very important part. And in Hawaii, you go closer to the equator and you do have less seasons. It's just less seasons there. They don't really experience winters, right? So you do have those opposites as you go closer to the poles. But it's just so much. There's so much there with like even trying to conceptualize the poles, let alone know what the fuck is actually going on, because it's so suppressed, and it's like, but we need to focus on the here and the now. And that's why I really think what you're doing is super important, because it's a way to actually deal with the here and the now. In this community, we talk a lot about big things that are worldwide, global, all over. And, that's all good and well. But if we have the opportunity to change the here and the now for the better and resonate now, maybe then we can thus outreach ourselves to a global extent. But this is how we do it. People ask for fucking answers. This is a fucking answer. This is at least a step on the right direction. I've lived in the woods basically always. Like I'm a weirdo. I live in the woods. I smoke a lot of weed. I love cannabis. But like I've always lived in the woods. I grew up in the woods. I've taught at outdoor survival schools. I've taught at outdoor therapy schools, and when I would be in the woods and I would go into town, I would get a lot of anxiety. Why? Like I used to think it was the people. I used to think that people's energy was just so off, it would throw on me. And I think what it is now, after like hearing people like you and talking about energy, is that the town is being manipulated. It's not the people, it's the fucking town and the layout of it all, man. Like what have you noticed is like some of the most manipulated areas that you've been in, and what causes that in your opinion?
Well, I think, because we were talking about Portland, or well, we were talking about Oregon before. there are places that I think people look at the New World Order poster children. Portland, Denver, Boulder, um,
San Francisco.
one that gets neglected because it's where I'm from is Omaha. That's like FEMA district number 4, I think.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah. Places like Austin, um, Los Angeles. I mean, Hollywood, the whole esoteric, those towers specifically that are at the top by the Hollywood sign, those might be the last towers on earth I ever gift with anything or can get to, because I swear they're guarded. If it, It's really hard to find people in Los Angeles, and actually Los Angeles in all of California, I think Los Angeles is the key to a lot of the geoengineering agenda in that state because of the esoteric energy, the bubble that is over, I would call it, I'm going to call it Satan's playground.
Smog bubble, right? Or something. They always
have.
Yeah.
Well, which is really, I mean, so any smog, like when people see smog, it's not car exhaust. There is car exhaust in it, but it's sticking to electrified. It's sticking to the ionized air. It's the same thing they do with fires, where fires are made to look, the wildfires are made to look worse than they actually are, because the smoke, these charged particles going up into the air are then being zapped to high hell, and they're manipulating it. So like you see these really ugly suns, you see the sun is in a really ugly, like orange and black and bloody red, whatever. They're also doing rituals. They're always doing rituals at those times. So it's like, the fires are made to look worse than they are. The pollution's made to look worse. Anything to basically say, drive a Tesla. You need to drive and stop eating anything that's not genetically modified. And I'm not vegan, so I'll say, like, stop eating meat. Whatever, do your own thing. But the idea of eating like lab grown meat, what the hell, So it's a way of like manipulating that. But there are these bubbles. Look for these bubbles. And like in the case of Austin, if there's anybody watching this, I know one individual who came to visit me, and we spent the day I taught him how to make everything, and he went back to Austin. Austin is like a huge part of this agenda with the electric battery and changing the energy signatures. There's a reason Tesla went there. There's a reason Musk is moving everything from California to there. There's a reason why the architecture around downtown Austin that's going up right now all has pyramids on top of it. Everything about it is incredibly dark and incredibly demonic. And that doesn't mean if you live there, people are like, oh, don't talk shit about my city. No, there's good things about it too. But people need to pay attention to those things. Like I hear from a lot of people in Oregon specifically. I've been actually drawing a lot of my own attention over to Portland, because it has been a poster child for what we would call sustainable development. And there's a reason the whole Pacific Northwest has been heavily manipulated with weather, I think, using the facility that is up around the corner in Alaska, and preventing moisture, preventing natural patterns that would benefit the northern US and southern Canada, which is a huge food production belt. And it's just all being completely obliterated. And so, but Portland specifically, because I know people that are there, and I have, is an eyesore to me. But anytime somebody reaches out to me from Portland, I send them free shit. If they buy anything, I send them more free shit. Like I've been trying to there, and like Seattle, Spokane,
Seattle is fucking bad,
places,
dude.
but like you have to look at what is the energy signature of this place. Like for example, DC is a damn pentagram, or pentagram. You've got Denver. I'm sure everybody's been to that airport by now and knows something fishy is going on. So it's like you look for things like that. You look for things that are militarized, things that have symbolism, things that have natural energy generators, things like obelisks and rock formations. And I mean, when the Washington Monument is a prime example of an energy generator that's not even a cell tower, although God knows what's on the inside of it because we can't see it. So you look for things like that, and like those are typically really good context clues of where you should probably be trying to change the energy signature back to whatever, or, same with the ley lines. Follow the railroad tracks and you'll find things till the end of time, because they built the railroad tracks along the ley lines because the railroad tracks are just a giant antenna. And the railroad tracks are the reason the telegraph worked in the first place. But if you look at people, they always think like, oh, they built the railroads across the water out of convenience. No, they didn't. It's because water is an energy conductor.
Yeah.
And because whatever sadistic jerks created this country, at least in our case, I'll say just the US.
Yeah.
They knew what the hell they were doing. And this is long before it was even the US. But I'm just saying, it's like, it's been going on for so long, and people just look for these things. You're going to see energy everywhere. And it's like the question you asked me earlier in the conversation, how has doing this, like what has it done to open me up to? And it is this, you see it everywhere. And you're like, okay, this needs to be busted. That needs to be busted. And eventually you're like Rain Man. And it's like, you look around, it's like everywhere needs to be busted, because everywhere has been bastardized and manipulated with its energy.
Bust it, baby. That song has a whole new meaning now.
If people are curious too, I think by now they know, but like when we say gifting in the Orgone community, like gifting just means the act of leaving or of distributing whatever the devices are you're going to distribute within that environment. The reason it's called gifting is because there's one guess whose pocket it comes out of. It's a gift. So you've given that as a gift.
I think that's really great too. Because we have to be smart with our words that we choose to use. Talk about inversion, perversion. The language that we speak is heavily perverted. Francis Bacon had a large part in that ploy. Basically, with the Shakespearean cipher or the Baconian cipher through Shakespeare and things like that, manipulating English as we know it, then English becoming like the only language that will be universal. Why is that? Because it's a universal cell to keep us in these word magic. Everybody, if you have a universal language, the issue with that is the fact that it basically can be used and contorted. Like you look at the law dictionary, the same exact word in the dictionary of law has a different meaning to the word, driving. And when I talk to you, hey, you driving out to town later? Yeah, man, I'm driving out there. When you tell a cop that you're driving, means you're transporting good. You know what I mean? That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
There was one thing you were talking, I wanted to say it, that slipped. What the fuck was it? It was about, it was trains. You made me think of something. So train tracks are a lot older than what people think, and the steam train was not the first train. That was our story to tell us that trains are another story. But really, like you said, they're built on ley lines, so they were using magnetic energy to have these trains originally. That was their original fucking use. And water. And I don't
I know it never. The one thing I've learned above anything else in the work that I do, it never ends.
Yes.
The bubble of all the dots, the pieces, the puzzle pieces, you flip them over and you think you figure them out, and there's two new pieces in its place, and it never ends. But you put enough pieces together and you start to compose a picture that, okay, at least you can guide yourself a little bit better. And I'd say if you want to know about the geoengineering agenda, go start busting towers and start taking pictures and videos of the sky, because it's not going to add up to what you read on paper. And I've learned far more over learning about energy, currency, the monetary system, energy generators, all that stuff. I've learned more about geoengineering and what's going on with us and what they're really trying to do, whether it's GMOs or pyramids. But what it is, all of it makes more sense when it's all about this frequency. For whatever, even if you don't know the whole ifs, ands, or buts, it's like, just know it really is all about frequency.
That's yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think I'm gonna put that in the title and the show notes. As for this episode, I want to wrap up with a couple questions.
Right.
Okay, one, salt. Does salt play a role in any of this type of energy work with Orgone?
I'm probably not the best person to ask that. A lot of salts based on their mineral content are, I think the word is diamagnetic. I know people that will put certain types of salts in an orgone device. I also know that there are certain salts that, like the quarries, the mines around this planet, are highly energetic because of that. We also use things like Himalayan salt and different types of salts that we use for energy I mean, it's probably no coincidence, even though it sounds mystical and like a movie plot. But like, why is it that you would put, everyone's seen Hocus Pocus and the salt to keep the witches away? I'm like, where the
Yeah,
hell did that come from? So it's like there are occult purposes. There is an esoteric component to that. I don't know enough about using it for myself. I mean, I use cell salts.
you
I
do.
actually,
Nice.
you know what? I will say that when I'm using a power wand, and doing like what I would call my version of meditations and trying to, quote unquote, conjure rain, I do better when I've consumed copious amounts of the cell salt that I am for my sign I'm supposed to consume. It's magnesium
Mm,
phosphate.
yeah.
That's like my thing. I think Barolando told me that. But anyway,
Every zodiacal sign has a cell salt
yeah, I
and that
saw
it
the book. I need to
correlates.
read that. I need to read that book. But the point being is like, so there is something energetically. I mean, there's a reason the salt that's in the ocean is essentially the electrolyte for
Mm.
the fluid that's in the car battery. So I mean, it's like they of course, what have they done? They've vilified salt and they want us consuming the wrong
Yes,
kind of non-mineral salt. But it's like, oh my God, you need so much salt
I
in this
know.
life to function.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's because it's an electrolyte. It's keeping that charge. So I've been wondering a lot lately too that like I know everything seems magnetic, and then it's like Crow, I think it was, it said, everything here, it's like the sun is electric, the moon is magnetic, everything here is either electric or magnetic. And I agree with that. I feel like everything is pushing and pulling a magnetic charge. And then the current of the electricity, or what we would call electricity, is what then runs when that magnetic charge, has been successfully conducted or successfully joined. And so you put the two together, and then you essentially have what would be the flow of life energy. I'm gonna have to put that on a t-shirt or something because I like that. But anyway, sorry. So salt, yeah, I love salt. Does that help?
Me too. That's why I asked it because I felt like there was a connection somewhere with it. I was like, I love salt. I fucking take cell salts as well. Um, I noticed that so I think part of the reason why I got dragged down this rabbit hole of research and work and just, this awakening process for me was because my body does not do well when it's not getting all the things that we're supposed to fucking have. Like some people are so lucky they can eat like shit, they can do all these things, and they just look great. They're all the things. My body, when I'm doing all those things that someone else that has like these crazy fucking alien genes, basically, like I will start plumping up, like muffin topping like a motherfucker, and so on and so forth. And it's like, but when I sweat, I do hot yoga, I meditate, I mineralize, I get with water, I laugh, and I align with my spiritual truth. I am the best that I can ever be, and that shows me that that's exactly what I need to be doing. And salt, as crazy as it is, has brought me to that level of understanding. And so I'm wondering, because yeah, like you said, occultic, esoteric type of magical properties of salt, electrical magnetical properties of salt. I was wondering if it enhanced it, and it sounds like I'm just going to go with the intuitive of fuck yeah, salt enhances it because salt is life. Salt is great.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to end with, there was a interesting synchronicity that happened today, right before we went on. So we were going to do this show on Saturday, but I'm going to Florida for my cousin's wedding. and we decided to do it today. And then today I was on the phone with Corey Daniels. Are you familiar with Corey Daniels?
Yeah. Yeah. Corey's down in Phoenix. I've blogged about it, but here, yeah. Please go on.
Well, I think you knew his friend Doug.
Yes.
Doug
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to say like hello, because I told him, I was like, well, I'm meeting with Mitch soon, and I told him your story, and he's like, I think I know that guy. I think it was a buddy with my friends Doug, and so he's gonna be listening to the episode. Is there anything you want to say to him or anything like that?
Well, first of all, hey, how's it going? I will say I talked to Corey very, very, very briefly. He did a phenomenal episode on something that happened here in Sedona a few years ago. It was he got a tip off from some folks down on Dry Creek Road when a military convoy came through town in the middle of the night. And it disappeared into this place it disappeared into an area that could only have gone to this little resort called Enchantment, which has its own bag of never-ending bullshit, like conspiracies and things. It's very dark there. Doug, he's passed away last year, took me there to this area where we call it the Bradshaw Ranch. It was the old Bradshaw Ranch. That was part of the episode Corey did. And there's just a lot of sketchy things there. And I think they call it the Secret Mountain Wilderness. I call it Sasquatch turf or Sasquatch territory. It's where the hikers disappear. It's where the weird anomalies happen. It's where people can see what looks like different craft in the sky. This is just west of Sedona. And well, it's like south and southwest of Sedona. But anyway, it was a fantastic episode. I would recommend about the military convoy, and I think they could find it by looking for Bradshaw Ranch, because it was out towards that way where they built Enchantment, which we've gifted heavily, because people don't know, like I think the Bilderberg group meets there once a year, and there's some just a lot of there's some sketchy stuff. People think Sedona is all like this super high vibe, and like it's got its high vibe stuff, but there's a side of Sedona that I think most people, they're so oblivious to it. And it's not all unicorns and rainbows. There are a lot of people here, I think, waiting for what I would call the apocalypse to happen, because they know it's going to be a safer place based on where they live in like the rich area, but like the fancy place that will be last to go. If so, I don't mean to be dark about it. I'm just saying if that were to happen. And so anyway, yeah, but Corey did a great episode on it. Had some eyewitnesses that just went through the night that this happened, and the next day, as I was piecing this together and watching his show, then we had talked on the phone briefly, but I saw so much crazy shit in the sky the next morning, and I had a bunch of pictures and videos of it, just trying to figure. I knew nothing about it at the time. It was a week later I watched the episode and was like, wait a minute. Went back and looked at the sky and what was going on over the Bradshaw Ranch towards that direction. I'm in the village of Oak Creek, which is about 7 miles away from the city of Sedona. And so that direction, you could see like there was something going on, and there's always a military presence. But anyway, yeah. So
wow.
I'm sorry. I just can't give short answers. My apologies
Dude,
for that.
no, it's fucking fine. I love it. Well, here's the thing. Corey was like, yeah, man, like, tell him what's up, and see if he's down to do like not a swap cast, but like where we get on and do like a round table or something and just get into some crazy shit.
Yeah, if you want to learn about underground military bases, go to his website. And I have watched quite a few of his episodes and read. He does a blog and his videos. He's a very good writer, and I've looked at like all the stuff he talks about with underground bases, and we have spent a lot of time in the last 3 years going to undisclosed locations to take care of stuff. Basically, I'll leave it at that. So like using his research to find those areas that I would consider them to be demonic, but some people might just say that maybe there's some form of vibratory, whether it's high or low. To me, anything that's on the military spectrum, I'm not a fan. So I'll say that.
Yeah, yeah, fuck yeah. I mean, and if you are, you're a suspect, motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, if you, we could talk about that off the air. But yeah, if you're interested in doing something, we could set up a show. It'd be a fun little, just getting into some crazy deep esoterica. Um, because yeah, you're a great conversationalist. You podcast host love podcasters and awesome people that can just fucking talk. Sometimes I get guests on where I'm just like trying to pull things out of
Oh.
them. Yeah, bro,
Well,
it's totally a thing.
I appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, it's I see this as important, and I know some people could say, oh, boy, he really just thinks so highly of himself. No, it's like there's no way to say this without someone misinterpreting, but I do think that the work that I do is serious, like of the utmost importance right now. And it's not because I do it that I therefore think, and that's why it's special. It's because we're dealing with a frequency war. That it's frequency. It's all a battle for this frequency, and what's the frequency we're going to exist in. And it gets weird. So we have a lot of repair to do. I don't like to use the word heal, but we have a lot of things to fix. We have a lot of work to do. So
yeah, a lot. But I think it's okay, and it's healthy to talk highly of yourself and to at least motivate yourself.
Well, yeah.
And it's like if people like there's such an issue with this understanding of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And
oh yeah.
Especially living in Arizona, I could only imagine. Dear sweet Lord.
Yeah.
Final question. This might be a loaded one, because you're looking at the sky a lot, but what is the craziest shit you've seen in the sky?
Oh, wow. Gosh, I think I'd have to think more about. I can say the most common would be the choppers, the chopper anomalies. Craziest thing for me was the second chembuster I ever made. This was in Chicago. All of a sudden, this was one night, I was hearing this voice that sounded, I thought it was the Mothman. People talked about the Mothman. I was like, ooh, is this the Mothman? Hearing this buzzing sound going through the trees around my building, and until I asked it, like, if you're there, show yourself or get out. Like you don't have permission to be here, and it's like you just sort of exert this dominance. And right after that happened, I noticed this glowing light coming over the building that was across the street. And I lived in Logan Square, which is sort of like I always used to say it was like a mini little Brooklyn within Chicago. I don't know. That might be, people say that's elitist, but whatever. It was just a little like the brownstone home kind of place. And so over this house across the street, this one of those, I think they're called like the Chinese candle lanterns, what you people like to set off, where they light the candle and then 100 of them will go up in the air or whatever at like a wedding or whatever. It started coming over. There was this lantern coming over this building, and it's like, I know you can't have those in the city of Chicago. But then I saw another one, and then another, and another, and they're just adding up until there had to be like maybe at least 200 of them, and they just coming right over my neighborhood, these candle lanterns, and they just floated on by as I'm standing there like, what the hell is going on? And I mentioned it to some friends, and they're like, hell are you on? Like, you, first of all, those are illegal, and why would they just all of us just right then and there just floated by? So it was the weirdest thing.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, if I really thought about it, later on I'll probably find something and email you and tell you, but because there's just weird stuff, lots of weird stuff. So and where you're it's not meant to scare people, because there's nothing to be scared of, but it's like where you're being watched, or something happened. There's a lot of synchronicities that it's like the odds of that happening are non-existent unless something is watching me right this second. So yeah.
Shit. No, that would be such a trip, just because you were busting at that time, right? you were?
Well, I was building a chembuster, and if you, the copper pipe things, the 6 pipe things that go outside in the yard, when you make one first time anybody makes one, I have yet to find anyone who's made one that didn't have some kind of experience that involved either the choppers, which I don't think are manned. I think things fly around all the time. I had one at 4 o'clock in the morning the other day that I'm like, I don't think you can just tell like there's no presence inside of them. And then it's like, is this a hologram? Is it beamed into my head? Am I the only one that hears this, or is it a drone? Who knows at this point? But we've had there's a lot going on, especially here in the desert, that I don't know.
I wonder if like they they obviously know about Orgone Energy.
They sense something.
Yeah.
You what I equate it to is that you have disturbed or disrupted the matrix, and Mr. Smith has come out to see who's screwing up my matrix.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad's going to happen. Over time, when I first started doing this, I didn't have a lot of people to compare notes with, so I wouldn't freak out. But I got a little nervous. I mean, I was just always a good kid. So like the idea, I never got a detention. So I sure as hell didn't want to piss off whatever galactic, was going on. You know what I mean? I mean, just that idea, that thought process. But over time, you're just like, what I'm doing is I'm helping the planet. I'm helping Mother Nature. It is throwing me a bone right back at me and taking care of me. It's nothing to really worry about, because as long as you can't just will away everything, but at the same time, don't carry those frequencies so they can't tap into you in the first place.
Oh yeah. That's important. That's super fucking important.
And the anomaly stuff has gone down in occurrence, mostly, I think, just because like here in my house, I know there's more Orgonite here than I have more Orgonite than God, I think, at this point. But there's also just the fact that like the grids we've created, there are so many pyramids. I've got things blasting frequencies. I've got stuff like this all over the house with different numbers of things. We'll talk about that off camera. But it's just, there's a lot going on around this compound and this village where I live, and the entire city of Sedona. We've gridded. There's more here than I think anywhere on Earth. And so once you do enough of it, the changes you see with each batch you make or the things you do become more subtle. But that first chembuster, I would love if everybody go make a chembuster, and then just pay attention to the sky, pay attention to what you feel, and pay attention to anything you see flying around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot to unpack in this episode, and if you want to leave links to where people can find your work and contact you and any of that good stuff.
Great. Yeah. I would say best place to go is my website. It's the Orgone, Orgone, the Orgone Donor.com. I also can be found on Instagram. I have such a long list. I have to approve people, because I get so much harassment and trolls and bots and shit. Like I try to make sure every person who wants to follow me on social media is in fact a human being, so that I stay under the radar of certain algorithms, and things are just more enjoyable. But I try to blog when I can. I summarize it for Instagram, but then the bread and butter of what I do is on my website. And I have tutorials, instructions, all kinds of things. People can do this. I prefer people get out there and start making this stuff and doing it themselves. And so I have just a wealth of information there to do it, and to do it successfully. And it just, people can email me with questions if they want. It's on my website. And yeah, that's I think that is all I have to say about that. Right.
Beautiful. Yes, this is how
like a kid's book report. So
and what next? But I do want to ask before we're off the air, just so people can know too, so they can get off their ass and start making stuff, as well as supporting you too. But what brand of resin do you like to use?
I actually have on my frequently asked questions page, that question is a very elaborate question because I use different kinds for different things.
Ah.
If I'm going to gift a water source, I'm going to use I'm going to use something that's safer for water. There are your polyesters and fiberglasses and your generic kinds. There are your marine resins, boat resins, things like that. There's casting resin to make things that are acrylic, decorative, those types of things when you want clear results. And then you've got your epoxies and your eco-epoxies. You also have beeswax, but I don't do beeswax because I couldn't make anything without it melting because I live in the desert. And so there's a whole tangent. Basically, if people want to be entertained, go to my frequently asked questions page because I got a soapbox there that I have to, a disclaimer, because of all the ridiculousness I've heard over the years and what people think about resin, which has been vilified horribly.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, if you are watching this, and if you are someone, first of all, if you email me to complain about resin, you're probably doing it from a device made with child labor. So get off your high horse right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondly, the towers are not going anywhere. This problem is not going anywhere, at least overnight. And there are other means, I'm sure, to get rid of towers that we are not there yet in this realm. And I'm not going to say what they are because I don't want to be labeled anything negative. But you need something that is going to withstand the elements of time and the outside nature. And unfortunately, we have been, well, fortunately, I would say we've been blessed with a material that not only attracts this energy and is an organic material that is perfect for it, but it will withstand those elements. And that is essentially plastic. And I would rather have a billion hockey pucks made of plastic buried out there if everywhere could look like Arizona did right after we had that heavy monsoon season, because nature wouldn't give a flying rat's patoot about the plastic because of the trade-off of the environmental impact of everything that benefits from these devices that are, they need to be around. They need to be able to withstand the tower or they're not gonna, they're useless. So that's my 2 cents about that. People can read about it and they can learn about my soapbox and personality types. It's basically like, yeah, it's entertainment. I get messages all the time about my frequently asked questions page. People often find it quite hilarious. So,
well, it's funny. Is I actually had this in my notes. I didn't get to bring it up, but because it is a big thing, I knew we could talk about it for a while. But the psyop of oil, the oil psyop, not plastic psyop, man. Like it's a gift. You're right. Everything in our society is alchemical. It comes from alchemical processes, and everything is manipulated through science of understanding matter and how matter, is transmuted or manipulated. And so oil is like the blood of this planet, and it is a gift to be able to know how to take that oil and to use it and to make something that extracts the energy. It's almost like that was the fucking purpose of it, or it is part of the purpose. So vilification, flip the script, man. It's probably on the other side that they're not slapping us with right in our fucking faces.
I mean, it is a gift. And to that sentence though, do we waste it? Yes. Could we use it better? Absolutely. Like everything. But it's no different than when they spill it, I guarantee you they intentionally spill it. So it is all orchestrated. The same way that a fire that's been made it's like, oh, you've got a forest fire. Well, I guarantee you they started it. And what's the result? Someone who is on their high horse is going to say, human beings need to do better. And it's like, human beings didn't cause that. So it's like, and that, yeah, a whole other can of worms. I know. But I'm just saying, it's like people need to look at the silver lining of this gift, and also know that oil is absolutely infinite. It takes a little time to replenish, but I'm glad you said blood of the earth, because it's no different than a it's like a blood transfusion, and you can give blood and your blood will come back. It's the same thing. There is no scarcity. So
I agree. Yeah. And it's a heavy thing that obviously we're wrapping it up here, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
We have shit to do. We got to eat food and go back to work and do all the other things. But I want to thank you again, Mitch, for coming on. And yeah, this has been a pleasure. I hope we get to do it again at some point.
I'd love to. So thank you so much for the opportunity again, really. And yeah, I look forward to the next conversation just as much. So thank you.
Hell yeah. And guys, if you can't get down with that, wake up.